Welcome, Traveler's Blueprint community. I am Bob Demena, and here with me, as always, is the very true-hearted Elliot Shibley.
Thank you, Bob. So before we get into the episode, I would like to make a point that if you are listening to this episode on iTunes or Spotify, check out our Instagram and our Facebook because we post all of our guests' pictures. And if you're listening to the Travel Bites, then it will have articles that we've researched and provided in the episode. Also, we do have a brand new YouTube page. And by brand new, I mean it's like 2 or 3 months old by now. But please subscribe to that. Please subscribe to our current podcasting platform wherever you listen to it. And the last thing that I'm getting into, which is the website. So we've updated the website quite a bit over the last few months, and now includes consulting services that you can work with Bob on planning your next trip. We have a travel around table series that we've been working with other travelers to discuss pertinent travel topics. We have a book and workbook coming soon, which is currently in production. We have a travel cheat sheet, which if you subscribe to our newsletter, you will get a free one. And it's 5 pages of short, pertinent information to help you plan your next trip. And lastly, we have our very own Philadelphia tour guide, Keshler, which is yet to be released, is currently listed on our website. And if you would like to book a trip with him, just go to our website, click on one of the 2 tours that he offers, and you can enjoy a trip to Philadelphia.
Yeah, the beautiful city of Philadelphia, our hometown. So, getting into our next guest, this guy put a very unique spin on what it means to travel. He has been involved in journalism since 2010, and he's gone to countries ranging from Iran to Russia, Kyrgyzstan, China, Belarus, and focuses on areas of conflict, gun smuggling, drug smuggling, and as a result encountered landmines, the Taliban, and
Russian
I guess multiple
mafia in China.
Oh yeah, just it was just so unique and interesting, And I'm not going to give you more than that. I hope you enjoy the episode. Without further introduction, please give it up for our next guest, Michael Hilliard.
Welcome to the Traveler's Blueprint. Start designing your next adventure.
Michael, welcome to the Traveler's Blueprint podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you are a geopolitical writer. You are the host of your own podcast, the Redline podcast. But interestingly, we were connected through a Facebook comment on a podcasting group where people were just commenting on travel podcasts and travel topics. And I came across your comment and was immediately interested in what you had to say. And you did not disappoint with the following correspondence. We ended up talking in Facebook Messenger for a little bit before you came on the show. And you gave me a ton of different topics that we could discuss that I have so many questions on, and I'm really looking forward to asking you about. From drinking with the Taliban in Uzbekistan.
That was a fun night.
Well, we're going to talk about it. Yeah, you've had a gun put on you by the Russian mafia in Beijing. You almost skied into a minefield in Georgia.
Yeah.
There's
just to name a few.
The list is pretty extensive. Stuck in Chernobyl, artillery shelled in Kyrgyzstan. Did I pronounce that right?
Kyrgyzstan. It's a very odd little country in the middle of Central Asia.
I didn't know where. I mean, I had an idea just from the stand where it was located, but I ended up googling it, and it's interesting. So we have a lot to talk about. I guess we should just jump right into it, though, right? Elliot, do you have anything?
Yeah. Oh, well, I do. Before we get into those fascinating things, can you tell us what it means to be a geopolitical writer?
So what it means is most of my stuff is ghostwriting. So I get paid by a politician or someone else to write. They'll want a paper saying, here's the British response to an invasion of Moldova. Have someone like me write that paper. And then they'll pretend that they're smart and they wrote it if they're going for a job or something.
Okay, so you make other people look smart.
That's pretty much the job, yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully you'll make Bob and I look smart. It's going to be tough to do.
Yeah. That's a really interesting career. How did you get into that?
It's a super weird kind of. I was just traveling around sort of Russia and a few of these odd countries, and then kind of met guys who I was always interested in geopolitics, and then kind of met guys who were doing this, and they were like, "Look, you know your stuff. Do you want to do some ghostwriting stuff with me?" And it just kind of branched from there. It's mostly from dudes I met in bars, and we got chatting and got into this field by just kind of generally having an idea what's going on.
So you actually were into travel and had been traveling before you even got into geopolitical writing, and so that transition wasn't hard. It actually helped.
No, I was traveling war zones far before I did this. I always had a rule that, you know, the cheaper the worse the war zone, the cheaper the vodka is going to be. So it's always a good option to get you through things.
All right.
What made you want to go to a war zone?
Well, generally it was kind of this really weird, you know, I grew up in a military household and got told Russia was the enemy and the Soviets and the communists. And then I had a big night with a friend of mine, and we booked this one-way ticket to Moscow. And we woke up in the morning, went, well, we bought it, let's go. And we went to Moscow. And I kind of had my world kind of shocked that Moscow was really nice and people were friendly, and it was nothing like I'd read in the books. And then I was like, well, I wonder what other countries are going to be like that. And then it kind of led to going into Iran and Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan and Mongolia. And it kind of spread from there of going, you know, let's actually go there and see how crazy this country is. And generally, most countries are pretty fine once you get there.
So your interest in understanding what a country was, aside from the way that you're from Australia, made those countries or reported on those countries, wrote about those countries, you wanted to see it for yourself. And that's how you got started in traveling?
Pretty much. I wanted to see how, you know, you hear all these stories like Kazakhstan, you're like, oh, it's going to be a Borat country, and you get there and it's like actually lovely and the people are really friendly, and you go, oh,
that's okay, a really interesting reason to start traveling. That's the first time I've heard that.
Well, I mean, think about how many people can't disassociate the government from the people of the country. You know,
that's
I mean, even the United States, for example, there's a lot of hatred and sour feelings towards the United States based on our politics. But obviously, if you travel through the country, you have a different experience than what you see at the top of our government. So, and that goes for every country throughout the world. And a lot of these countries do have bad reputations. Iran, I know, is a good example. Pakistan, I know, is a good example of this because, especially being an American, all the news you get is just about the war and terrorism and oil and things like that. But then you talk to people who have actually traveled to those countries and spoke with the people and sat down and ate with them, and they will tell you a completely different story and kind of open up the idea of what it is to actually live in that country rather than only pay attention to what's on the news. So that's really cool, man.
Yeah, Iran is a very classic example of that. You know, when I kind of told, you know, because I'm doing some work for the state government as well on foreign policy stuff, and I was like, oh, I'm going to run. They're like, oh, it's dangerous, you know, be careful, it's going to be the worst. I got there and the most lovely people you've ever met. The food's amazing. A lot of people speak English. People are generally friendly. They felt very welcome the moment I got there. And it was just this kind of weird juxtaposition of everyone thought I was going to die. But the closest I came to death is overeating all the great food that was there. And people keep saying, no, another course, you're fine.
Right. Well, that's great to hear. And I'm glad you said that and put it out there for our listeners as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really interesting, though, is I've never really thought that Australia really pushed that Russia was the enemy. I guess I know Australia has a lot of similar mentalities as the USA because we are allies, but I never thought outside of our own country that Russia was the evil empire as it was shown to us.
Yeah. Australia is we are the Texas of the British Empire. We are diet America at this point. To the point where Australians follow US politics and US trends so carefully. You know, you can ask an Australian who the deputy prime minister is and no one knows. You ask an Australian but they'll tell you all 16 Democratic nominees and what they're going for and what's going on in America. And, you know, it's insane. We follow your news and your goings on far closer than we follow our own. It's
yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, it's bad. I think a lot of foreigners understand U.S. politics better than, I won't say a majority of Americans, but an unsettling number.
You know, I've thought about this before, though. Is it because they're genuinely interested, or is it because we have our fingers in so many different
Yeah.
areas around the world that they have no choice but to pay attention?
I think it's a combination of the fact we watch a lot of your TV. I mean, most of the shows we watch are American shows. But also the fact that what you guys do, if you guys sneeze, we catch a cold. What America does is going to end up in Australia pretty quickly. So we kind of just all follow you guys because we can shake our fists all we want, but we're Australia. Like, you know, ooh, Fiji's going to be scared. You know, no one cares.
Interesting. All right. Let's get into this. I already, Elliot and I talked it over, and we really want to just dive into the Taliban. So you drank with the Taliban in Uzbekistan. Now, going back to what we just mentioned with the United States and Australia being close allies, the Australian also has deployed troops to the Middle East to combat the Taliban. So how did they take you in, and how did you come to have drinks with them?
So it was a very weird story. So there's not a lot of places to stay in Uzbekistan. They've literally just opened the border to the point where, because they had this dictator named Karimov died, and they've just started opening up the border to the point where when I left the country, they had to get a supervisor to figure out what to do with Australians because they've never met one. So we ended up going there, but there's only a few hotels and a few places to stay if you're staying in Tashkent, which is the capital. And there was this guy and his middle-aged guy and his assistant staying in the same hotel, and the guy would stop you talking to his boss. His assistant was very kind of keep away from the boss, but they were taking lots of phone calls from odd numbers, mostly Afghanistan numbers, and they were probably from Afghanistan because they spoke Pashtun. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of things that didn't add up. I was like, okay, I'm curious now. I'm going to see what I can do here. So I told his like assistant, because his assistant smokes, and I went outside and had a smoke, and I was like, oh, what are you doing in Tashkent? It's like, oh, you're talking about girls and bars and stuff. And he's like, oh, I know a great little bar. It's great. You can have a great time. Take your boss there. You can have a great time. What I knew from a friend of mine is that bar only lets you in if you speak Russian. So they went to the bar, and I left about 10 minutes after them. And they obviously got bounced from the bar because they don't speak Russian, whereas I do speak passable Russian. So I came in and was like, hey, I was going to get lettings, I spoke Russian. Oh, these two, yeah, they're my friends. That's Bill and Dave. Let them in. And I got him into the bar, and the assistant was very thankful because obviously he was pissed off his boss because he wasn't going to get let in on this club that he recommended. And I said, oh, well, you can make it up to me, have a drink. And then I just started having a few drinks, and he didn't hold his drink that well. And I was like, oh, what are you doing in here? He's like, oh, I'm a film student. Like, oh, cool. I used to shoot commercials for a living. What's your favorite camera? He goes, oh, I don't know cameras. Okay, cool. And then next question is like, oh, so what sort of commercials would you shoot? Mostly business ones. And I'm like, oh, cool. I used to do that. That's really cool. What sort? He's like, oh, I don't know business stuff. And then he questioning, and then sort of got a few more drinks in him, because obviously to buy a bottle of vodka over the bar in Tashkent is about the equivalent of $2.50 US. Just buy the whole bottle over the bar. So we just, is $10 US, take a couple things.
Wow.
And after a few drinks, after asking me his story and his childhood, eventually he's like, look, I'm running guns for the Taliban, running surface-to-air missiles and rah, rah, rah. And I was like, I looked at my airline, I was like, called it, to pick it. And we just started talking about logistics of the Taliban, how they're getting stuff across the border. And he was really nice. And we just kind of chatted about the logistics of it. He's like, I'll come to Australia. We'll hang out again. I was like, no, man.
What?
Yeah. So it was this super weird night and he just couldn't hold his drink quite as well. And it just cracked in the end. He's like, look, you know what you're doing. Because I was kind of like, it's weird, that kind of missile stuff. He's like, yeah, okay, you got me. I'm shifting surface to air. So I was like, I called it. Cool, we'll get the next round.
The Taliban needs to vet their personnel a little bit better. They need to get them drunk. This dude just started slipping after a few drinks.
Well, do they typically not drink?
That's the thing. A lot of these senior guys do not drink if you get senior, they don't drink at all. If you get mid-level guys, so the guys who are commanders, they will not drink in Afghanistan or Pakistan, but they will drink in Uzbekistan because that's the only time they get away with it. So a lot of them will come have their weekends to party in Tashkent because it's very close, it's not too far from Afghanistan border. Or they'll go into rural Uzbekistan, have a lot of drinks, and then they'll duck back in and you go back to being a very proper Muslim after that. But yes, because they don't drink very much, and I'm unfortunately a very bad influence. Don't worry, I'm just going to pour another one. It's all good too. I was far too polite, and I think that was the death of him.
That's funny. So, did you get into the war or anything like that?
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't want to get too far into it because obviously there's a lot of things he wasn't going to tell me. But generally, he was just effectively buying up Russian arms or buying up other countries' arms and shipping them into Afghanistan. Pretty much anyone who hates the US was just using him as a middleman to get some stuff in.
Okay. Right. Did you guys speak in English or Russian?
He speaks very broken English and a bit of Russian as well. So the majority of the conversation, we kind of like, he would speak in Russian and I would kind of go to Russian. And if he didn't understand, we'd both try English. And it was kind of this mishmash of like, we would, it just, whatever, like if he couldn't figure out what that word was in Russian, he'd try English. And then I might like, oh, yeah, I get what you're saying. But yeah, it was bouncing between three languages because the assistants spoke some English and some Russian as well. So it was kind of the three of us, bouncing around languages until one of us could figure out what the other one was trying to push out.
Was there ever a point where you were sitting at the bar and you were like, I should get out of here?
I've had a few bars like that where I've had to run. My girlfriend and myself have a signal that for bars that get too hairy, where someone's about to get shot, we need to get out of here. But generally, no, he's not going to shoot me in a bar in Uzbekistan. He was polite. He was taking drinks. Most of these guys, if they're not on the front line, are pretty reasonable.
Okay. Could you tell if there was any animosity towards like Western culture or if it was just a guy trying to find a job to do?
It's mostly the job thing. There was a little bit there. Obviously, all of them have friends or family who've been attacked in the war. But generally his thing was, I'm just a gun runner. Like, it was, him selling guns was, he could afford far more for his family than could just, by farming in his province.
That's really interesting. Have you ever thought about in your line of work, focusing on the individuals like that? Like focusing on the general public and how they're dealing with the war, rather than how governments and the military are dealing with it, get into, well, I guess he is part of their military, so to speak, but more in line with understanding how just the general public over there is figuring out how to create a normal way of life in the midst of
it's so many different stories. I mean, you can go to someone in Kabul and they'll live a very normal life. Kabul is very similar to, how a Western city is. But you go down to a Helmut or a Uruzgan and it's, every man for himself out there. It really just depends on where you are in the country. There's some people are making oodles of money off it and some people are scratching livings off rocks. It's, it really just depends on where you are.
That's interesting.
It is. Well, speaking of Russian, how did you end up with a gun pointed at your head in China by the Russian mafia?
So this whole interview is going to make you sound like a terrible alcoholic. But I was in Beijing doing a story, and we went out for a night in partying around, and we were walking down the street, and we'd all had a bit to drink. And I ended up bumping into this guy by accident. It was sort of this short little Russian guy, two big guys, and his a couple of girls with him.
Like a Joe Pesci Russian?
Kind of, yeah. Like, the standards, like, it's still not able to stress. But yeah, and he said, he's Vinicius, which is Russian for I'm sorry. I responded in Russian. He was like, what, you got to speak Russian? We got chatting, and we were just chatting about Beijing. And he's like, look, I'm going to a party. You should come to this party with me. I was like, okay, sure, I'll come to the party. Not really thinking anything of it at the time. Then we went to this exclusive club, and he walked straight past the line. I went, that's weird, but it's fine. And then he walked straight past the security checkpoints where they, get you for metal and stuff. I was like, that's weird, but I don't think anything. I think it's fine. And he goes into this booth, and there's all these big Russian guys and some Ukrainians in there, and that's weird, but I'm sure it's gonna be fine. And then there's bottles of vodka everywhere, and we get chatting, and immediately they start talking about moving products and drugs, and I was like, okay, cool, I get where I am now. But
that's weird, but it's probably going to be fine.
I was like, but that's the thing. I looked at the buddy of mine who was with me, and I went, if we bail now, they're going to think we're cops, or we're going to think we're, not supposed to be here. Play it cool. we'll get out of this eventually. And what Russian mobsters love to do if they want to test you as fresh meat is they'll pull a gun on you and see how you react. If you freak out, then they'll mess with you the rest of the night, and they'll assume that you're either not supposed to be there or that you'll tell the cops on them or something.
Before you tell your reaction, did you know this prior, or did you learn this while you were in Russia?
I learned this while I was in Russia.
Okay.
From a bunch of Ukrainian sailors I was hanging out with in Moscow. No, Petersburg, sorry. It was Petersburg, where was that? But yeah, so I kind of knew what was going to happen. I was like, okay, he put the gun at me. I'm like, man, what are you doing? I'm just here to have a drink. Put it away. I don't want to cause any trouble. He's like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, seriously. You don't need a dick measure here, buddy. So he puts his gun away, and we had a few drinks, and I quietly soiled myself in my pants.
Dude, now, did you stay in the bar?
Yes, I stayed. Well, the drinks were free. So I stayed there till about 5-6 in the morning, and then I wandered back through Tiananmen Square to find my apartment again. But yeah, they're lovely. Again, most of these guys are fairly lovely when they're not committing horrifying crimes.
Right. Well, it seems as though, as long as you don't catch them on the other end of their business, or the opposing end of their business, they'll leave you alone.
Pretty much. As long as they know that you're not going to muscle in on their territory, you're not going to call the cops, you're going to drink with them, drink for drink. And that's what really gets you, is because they will pour shot after shot after shot. And you just have to keep going, yeah, okay. Cool, another one.
do you ever worry about blacking out and then being in a situation that you can't control, and the things that you say are out of your control, your actions are really no longer in your control, and you're around Russian mobsters?
I'm usually pretty good at holding the drink. But yeah, if it gets too big, there's always signals you give to, if I'm traveling hairy zones with people, I tend to we all have special signals. Like, look, if I do this, we need to I'll go to the toilet, you go to the toilet, and we'll escape out the back door, and we'll never speak of this again.
Right.
But generally, most of these guys are very polite. Particularly this, if you're not causing them trouble, they don't want to cause you trouble.
Well, if I ever run into the Russian mafia and I end up having a few drinks with them, I know what not to do when a gun is pulled.
Exactly. This is you should get it tatted on your arm.
There you go.
Happens all the time,
It does. I mean, I think that is extremely valuable travel knowledge for the everyday traveler.
Exactly. I pack my passport, I pack my traveler's checks, and then I pack don't get shot by the Russian mafia. That's my big three.
And if you plan for that, where depends.
Are either of you familiar with the comedian Bert Kreischer?
No. Yes, yeah, and that's the thing. I saw his piece, and I'm like, I fully get it. That makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
All right, fill me in.
He's a comedian. I've actually seen him live. His Netflix special, I was there during the recording. But he's has this bit on meeting the Russian mafia and essentially robbing a train with them while he was studying abroad for college. And it's so funny. And you just check it out. It's Bert Kreischer, The Machine story is what it is. The Machine. Yeah, it's great. It's really funny.
All right.
Yeah, Russians are always ballistically nuts. Russia is the only country I've ever seen a one-armed woman, while smoking, assemble and fire a Kalashnikov with one arm. It was that will stick with me. Sometimes when I go to sleep, my eyes close and I still see that woman staring at me with the smoke going.
Now, what do you think it is about Russia that makes them so tough? Is it the cold? Is it the radiation from the Chernobyl accident? Is it just all of the vodka? What is it that makes these people just like a different breed?
It's a weird combo. It's cold. Everyone, no one smiles. It's all, it's very go all the time. The best way to sum up Russia, when I was first I went to Moscow, I was meeting with some locals and I went, oh, Moscow's really beautiful, it's really lovely, but I haven't seen any homeless people. Where are your homeless people? He goes, it's no problem, or freeze to death. We deal with later. It's no problem.
That's funny. Yeah,
and that's why San Francisco has tons of homeless.
Well, I think there is a testament to the cold weather making you a tougher human or a tougher individual. Even looking at the United States, you have the Northeast, which has New York and Philadelphia and Boston, some of the, quote unquote, toughest cities, or the hardest cities to get by in, compared to some of the softer areas in the
I'd
South.
put Chicago in that list too.
For sure. Chicago is a very cold city in the wintertime. So
well, I just got back from the Arctic.
That's cold.
2 months ago.
Yeah,
that was really cold.
Yeah.
I ended up doing a story up in Murmansk, which is kind of right up in the Arctic Circle for Russia. I want to see the Northern Lights as well, and it was like, well, to go see the Northern Lights in Norway is like $2,500 US a week, a minimum, but to go see it in Russia is like $400 a week maximum, because it's rural Russia. But you have to deal with the fact that everyone is, you get there, like I Googled when sunrise is, it's like sunrise is in 2.5 weeks. I'm like, okay. Like even like you meet Siberians and they're like, my God, my friend, it's very cold out here. Oh, okay. Yeah, they have a pretty good sense of humor about it, but they all carry hip flasks. They don't allow you to buy bottles of liquor until 10 a.m. And at 10 a.m., there's lots of guys buying bottles of liquor. Like the Russians what they used to have this vodka, it's everywhere now, but it was still a Schneider. But in Russia, they, just because they could never think anyone wouldn't do that, the 700 ml bottles had a pot cap, not a lid, a pot cap, because they never thought that anyone wouldn't finish the entire bottle in one sitting. That gives you an idea of what you're up against up there.
What is it with vodka and the Russians? Why do they love vodka so much?
Potatoes.
Is it just the...
well, it's two things. It's very cheap to make. There's a big historical reason. It was the vodka license given to the Russian oligarchs back in the 1800s. It allowed to corner the market effectively. But vodka, it doesn't freeze. You can mix it with anything. It kind of, really bad vodka. Like you go down to sort of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, that kind of area, and the vodka gets real rough.
Nail polishy.
It's like drinking razor blades. But, after 3 of them, you don't feel your legs anyway, so who cares? But yeah, it's cheap to make. Like you can effectively, like in Kazakhstan, you can buy like a bottle of vodka for $2, $2 Australian, which would be $1.30 American.
Wow.
About that. Yeah, like it's super cheap and you can mix it with everything.
I guess you can't really carry around beer because beer would freeze.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you can just swig it and it keeps you warm, particularly in the Arctic. All those guys, they're just kind of, have a shot with every meal.
So that's how they're surviving. That's how they're playing the cold winters, is just being drunk. You're just having vodka in your blood at all
constant
times.
Vodka jacket.
Right. You can't freeze to death if 90% of your blood is actually vodka. And I think there's science
behind that. Solid logic.
Yeah, but generally they're all, not all of them drink vodka all the time. A lot of them drink, particularly poor Russians, they drink a lot of beer. Like even your Burger Kings and those kind of places will all sell this, what's called Baltica beer, which is, it tastes like a duck's urine, but sure.
All right, I have to ask, how do you know that? From people explaining it to me. But yes. Okay. I mean, it fits your profile.
Even middle-class Russians like, I would not drink that swill. It's disgusting. But yeah, generally the Russians are pretty up for just about anything. But vodka is usually the meal drink.
Okay. And was this story of you going to the Arctic, is this where you almost froze to death?
Yes. So when you get out of the airport in Murmansk, it's a tiny airport because they only do like 2 flights a day and it's in the middle of rural Russia. And I was like, don't worry about it. I'll just get an Uber. What Russia has is Uber, which is called Yandex. But my phone just stopped working and there's no cabs. And we're about 45 minutes from the nearest town because the airport's in the middle of nowhere. And, it's negative 30 outside. And I go, okay, cool. So I ended up having to run around just trying to find someone who I could speak any English or Russian with, and found some guy who I just talked with. Look, I'm going to freeze to death out here. You need to give me a hand to get home. Otherwise, I also caught the blizzard once in Moscow. I ended up getting in this cab after a big night and saying, "Oh, take me to this place." And when I'm sober, my Russians, it's like, "Я люблю vodka, пожалуйста." When I drink, my filthy Australian accent comes out. It's like, "Я люблю, пожалуйста, один vodka." And obviously it just goes out the window. And I got dropped. The guy pulled up. He's like, "Here's your hotel's here." I was like, "Yep, thanks, man. Here's some assorted money." And I got out, and it was blizzarding down. And I went, "Oh, this isn't my hotel at all." And I didn't have any maps or anything because my phone was dead. So I ended up just having to climb this spiral staircase, and all I could see is Red Square, like 6 Ks that direction. And I went, I kind of know where my hotel is from Red Square. So I ended up walking through this blizzard for like 4 or 5 Ks through the bad neighborhoods of Moscow, pretty much freezing to death. By the end of that trip I got home, I didn't have any feeling in my hands or fingers. Wow. And I think had I not been plastered on vodka, I don't think I would have made that.
Wow. So
here we go.
Murmansk. Is it Murmansk?
They say Murmansk, which is
okay.
Weird. It's sort of weird. Like Russians roll their R's quite a lot.
Murmansk, and that's in the northwest, like right next to Norway.
Yeah. So it's kind of right near Norway, Finland.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize.
Yeah,
Finland
kind of right
there.
in that corner. But it's where the Russians base their nuclear Arctic fleets from. It's also where they launch most of their missiles from.
So, going back to what you said about seeing the Northern Lights, 1, did you see them? 2, I mean, you said it was much cheaper, and I know it seems obvious why it's much cheaper to go there. They don't have the infrastructure for tourism. Would you recommend anybody actually takes a trip to Russia and then goes up towards the Arctic Circle to actually see the Northern Lights, or would you stick with Norway?
No, I highly recommend it. Russia's a lovely place. People are genuinely friendly, particularly if you're from an area they don't see a lot of people. Most bars I'll go into in like rural Russia or Uzbekistan or stuff, I'll say I'm Australian, they'll go, "Kangaroos," and they'll get free drinks for the rest of the night. People there are generally lovely. There's obviously bad people in a lot of towns, and you got to watch your back occasionally. Always have a plan. Don't be carrying lots of cash on you. Just generally be nice to people, and learn a bit of Russian because none of the cab drivers will speak English. But generally, people, it's quite nice out there. There's decent infrastructure. Just make sure you have a guy, someone, at least a cab ready to go from the airport, or make sure your Yandex works first. Generally, I'd recommend it. It's pretty good. Obviously, it depends on what your standards are. I mean, I don't really mind where I stay, whereas, the hotels I stayed in Murmansk weren't particularly nice. But I'm sure Norway would be nicer. But then again, it wasn't $2.5 grand a week, so I can't really complain.
Right.
All right. So moving, I guess, west/south, can you talk about Georgia and your ski trip?
So there's this, Georgia is a bit of a weird country. It's beautiful, lovely. If I've already had this talk with my girlfriend that we'll probably end up retiring in Georgia. But they have this amazing ski resorts up in the mountains because it's right in the Caucasus, which is the biggest mountains in Europe, if you count Georgia as Europe. But there's a country, so Georgia has these two imagine if 2 states broke away from the United States. Like imagine if Texas and Louisiana became 2 different states that don't have anything to do with the US. That's kind of Georgia. We've got these 2, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. And we went into South Ossetia skiing, and we went I'd never been skiing before. I was like, how hard could it be? But the guide, looking at my poor girlfriend, he goes, is over there, landmines, do not go. Over there, kill the gays Russia, do not go. Over here, not too bad, but probably be careful. And I accidentally, not learning how to ski, actually almost skied into the goddamn minefield because I am not very clever at it.
It's not that easy.
No, I figured that out very quickly. I accidentally bowled over an entire Russian family.
Nice.
Wait, what was on one side? So it was the minefield on one side. What was on the other side?
And kill the gays Russia.
Kill the gays Russia.
It's a particularly heavy bit of Russia. And he's like, and he looked at me when he said, he's like, and killed the gays Russia. I was like, I'm not gay, but sure. Okay.
That's my girlfriend.
Like the only she was great. She skied really well, and the only time she fell over is when I tried to take a corner and just couldn't get the corner and just went straight into this wall of snow and got stuck like this and had to wait for her to pull me out. And she fell over because she was laughing so hard at me falling into this pile of snow.
Wait, where was this again?
This was in South Ossetia. So a breakaway, unrecognized republic in between Georgia and Russia.
Can you imagine just going down the slope of the mountain and in the distance you just see explosions going off? Like, oh, another one fell off.
That's a hell of a learning curve. What about yourselves? Do you guys travel a lot, or where do you usually travel to? What's your favorite country destination?
So we're slightly more touristy than you.
The bar is pretty low.
Slightly.
Yeah. I mean, we just went to Peru. I guess it was a year ago now.
Yep.
That was the last place I went. But yeah, I travel with my wife a lot, just to Europe and things like that. I've been all over the United States.
Yeah, we try to do the more touristy stuff with the families, and then one of our other friends and Bob and I will try to do like a guys trip every 2 years. That's a little more off the beaten path. Still not crazy, but because families and living.
Yeah. Well,
so what's your favorite place? Where's the favorite place you've been?
Croatia, I think, for me.
Croatia's nice.
Yeah, I have a very fond place in my heart for Bonn, Germany. I ended up spending, I've said this so many times on the podcast, but I did a study abroad there for 4 months and fell in love with the city.
Germany's just lovely the whole way.
Yeah.
I just came back from Berlin because it was a cheap place to fly to. And then I did contacts there. But yeah, Berlin was lovely. Berlin's always lovely. Germany's always lovely. Frankfurt's great. They do this Glühwein, this hot wine with rum in it.
Oh, yes.
If you make the mistake at 9 a.m. and ask for a strong Glühwein. Yeah, it's strong.
Yeah, German strong.
Again, I feel like I'm coming across as an alcoholic in this interview now.
Now, do you travel for pleasure as well? Do you go to, have you ever been to the Coliseum or anything? Or is that too boring?
I haven't been in the Coliseum. But yeah, usually I have been to the Eiffel Tower. I did my touristy things. I've traveled a bit for pleasure. But I usually just enjoy the war zones anyway. They're far more interesting. The people you meet are far more interesting. If you go to a bar in rural Kazakhstan, you're only going to meet locals, drug dealers, arms dealers, government operatives, or journalists, effectively. So everyone you meet at the bar is like super interesting dudes who've all got super interesting stories. So yeah, you always have a pretty good night hanging with those guys.
Well, that's a good segue because I know your podcast, the Redline Podcast, you interview people under that realm, right? I know when I was looking on your website, CIA operatives and professors and things like that. Do you mind getting into your podcast and what it is you do?
Yeah. So what we do at the Red Line is we do one big subject every 2 weeks. So whether it be like the Libyan Civil War or, South Sudan or, Transnistria, we do these big subjects and we do a really big deep dive. So we're like an hour piece on it and we get the biggest experts. We get people from the White House, the CIA, MI6, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, all the guys who are actually making the decisions. Like I just got an email before I came on that we're doing a piece on North Korea because of what's going on. And we've got the Americans' head intelligence CIA expert on North Korea coming on the show to talk about what's going on there.
Wow.
So it's pretty much, like guys who work with the president. Like a couple of episodes ago, I had a guy who was like, "Oh, can we push back the interview 2 hours?" He's like, "Yeah, why? What's up?" He's like, "Oh, I need to go to the White House, but I should be helicoptered back by this time. I'll see you then." He's like, "That's a pretty good excuse. I'll see you then."
That's fair. That's fair. You go do that.
You go see the president, and I'll deal with you later. But yeah, obviously, it's all these super interesting people who are, the smartest of the smart people. So it's pretty much me being an idiot talking to very smart people.
See, I thought in the beginning we established that you were the one that make people look smart.
Yes, but they said there's levels. There's like paying me to be smart. There's me, and then there's actual really, really smart people.
You mentioned Transnistria. What is that?
So Transnistria is this breakaway Soviet republic between Moldova and Ukraine. So effectively, it still believes it's the Soviet Union. It still refers itself as like the Transnistrian Soviet Socialist Republic. There's still hammers and sickles everywhere. There's still statues of Lenin everywhere. And the whole country is a giant arms dump for the Russians. So when Russia was making its big plans to invade the West, they dumped all of their guns and nukes and everything else in Transnistria. So that's where they would hide it all. But now that the war's kind of over, there's all this, just this giant arms dump of a country with hammers and sickles everywhere that is so Soviet, it was almost terrifying. I think the best way to sum it up is I asked a local, I was like, all the table plants are made of plastic. Why is that? He goes, it's because you can't get the microphones wet. Like it's full KGB.
Wow.
Like they sent an intel officer to follow me the whole time I was there. It's a pretty nuts little place. Great cognac. They have this amazing cognac factory there. But yeah, it's a very, very odd place. That's when I started to leave very quickly.
This is a really interesting conversation because you're just confirming everything that I've learned in all of the James Bond movies I've watched about Russia. It's such an interesting country. Now,
I think I'm attracting a lot of attention I shouldn't be. Obviously, hanging out with, working for governments and stuff and doing geopolitics writing, I'm going to attract attention. For most people, you'll never have to bother with any Russian KGB or any of this kind of stuff. I think I'm a bit of a special case that, I'm attracting more attention than I should.
Yeah, well, you're seeking it out, right? I mean, that's why you're going there, and I'm sure you know how to get into those situations. If I'm traveling through Moscow with my wife, I don't think I'll end up in
you'd be
quite the same situation. You're right, yeah, and that's my understanding of Russia too, is that it is a beautiful place to visit, especially Moscow, St. Petersburg. I'd like to go there one day. I believe it's hard to get into with.
It depends. So you can get into an American passport's a little bit harder. So you can get in via Petersburg, and you can spend 3 days in Petersburg with a very weird kind of easy visa. But if you go through, Moscow, or you go through one of the other cities, you go do a full visa process, and it's like a 20-page visa application with everywhere you've been in the last 12 months, and if your father was in the military, and all these questions and whatnot. So yeah, that's obviously that's not great, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Then when I had to get my last visa and I wanted to go up to Severomorsk and Murmansk up in the Arctic, which is right where all the nukes and the submarines are, that visa was a little bit hairier than I wanted it to be.
I do want to jump back to the Redline podcast, but before I do that, let's stick with Transnistria. And I want to
found a new country that he loves.
I do, but I also want to hear about your experience being smuggled out of Transnistria.
So we got to Transnistria, and I did this story, and I met this guy there, and I went to for years, but he's very senior in the government there. And he's like, you should come, it'd be fun. And I was like, look, we're in Europe anyway, let's just duck to Moldova and we'll go into Transnistria and see what it's about. So we got a marshrutka, which is like kind of a minibus, across the border, and they took all our details and our passport scans and let us go in the country. I went, it's easy enough. Got to our hotel, and it was this, run-down little apartment. And the guy's like, you got the whole place yourself. We haven't seen a tourist in 2 months. Don't worry about it. It's all yours. I went, sweet, thanks. Have a good one. And about 2 hours later, I got an email from him saying, we've just had a random guy book a room. He's going to be staying with you guys. I was like, okay, that's suspicious, but sure. Whatever it is. And then I meet the guy, and he's built exactly like a little intelligence officer, a good stocky build, wears athletic clothing all the time, a bit of a chip on his shoulder. I was like, I have a suspicion, but sure, let's play it out. And I was like, where are you from? He's like, I'm from Magadan. I was like, Magadan is way over near Vladivostok. It's in the middle of nowhere, and no one from Magadan speaks English. It is in the middle of nowhere. It's like, very weird that you speak some English from Magadan. Like, whatever, I'll let that go. And then we went out for coffee and stuff, came back, and we found that he'd been through the whole apartment, so he's obviously looking through our stuff, taking apart the toilets and everything. I was like, okay, he's looking for something, so he's probably an intel officer. And then I was like, let's go for drinks. Let's get on the front foot about this, and invited him out for drinks. And he's only 5'5", I'd imagine, 5'6". So I plastered him, and his story fell apart. He wasn't from Magadan. He was actually from Yakutsk. His mum's name changed because obviously you ask a lot of questions beforehand, and you see if it matches with what he says when he's drunk. And I was like, okay, I get the feeling he's an intel officer. And then we lost him the next day. I kind of said, we're just going downstairs for a cigarette. And then we quickly jumped in a cab I'd organised, and we ducked off the other side of the city, and then left that and escaped. And then met with my contact and met with a few interesting people over there. And then I said to my government guys, like, hey, like, what's the deal with this intel officer in my apartment? He goes, I don't know anything about that. I went, yeah, there's a guy in my apartment. He's been doing this. He goes, oh, okay, that's a different department. Look, it means you're about to be arrested. Look, we'll have you out of prison in a week. I was like, man, I really don't want to go to prison. I really do not want to go to a Transnistrian prison. He goes, oh, well, okay. We'll have to get you out of the country. If he's doing that, it means you're probably going to get arrested in the morning. I'd say, you're either going to get done at the border or you're going to get done in the morning. I was like, okay, cool. So I had to quietly tell my girlfriend, I was like, look, I think we should just, maybe just head off soon. Maybe just get it back to Moldova. So he organised this guy he knew who drove this SUVs who smuggle people out of the country. Usually just guns. Like he has it's a special car with a special pass that doesn't get your license checked, no passport checks, no nothing. It's a don't look in the back kind of deal. So we got in this SUV and we told the KGB guy, like, we're going to Odessa in Ukraine. We're going to the eastern border because there's not far between. So Tiraspol's here, and there's kind of the Moldovan border here and the Ukrainian border here. And he obviously went, oh, cool. Yeah, cool. Go to Ukraine. He'd call probably so he could call his guy and go, yeah, they're going to be at the Odessa border very soon. And then we ducked the opposite way, so headed west rather than east. And the car pulls up to the checkpoint with all the guys with guns, and our special little driver shows his little pass, and they look at him and quickly hand him back his driving license and put down up the boom. And we left quickly with no passport checks and no exit visas. Wow. And I escaped back into Moldova. I think I'm the first person ever to say, thank God we're back in Moldova. And yeah, I breathed a very big sigh of relief when I got back into Kishinev.
Whoa, that's intense, man.
It was a bit intense. I really wasn't, and the worst bit is because it's an unrecognized republic, so no country apart from no one recognizes it. I got told when I told the Foreign Office that I was going over to Transnistria, they're like, yeah, no, we're not coming for you. If you get caught in Russia, we can talk with the Russians and get you out. But if you get caught there, like, there's no diplomatic immunity. Like, you're going to have to negotiate with Moscow to get a flight out. And Moscow is going to hold that above you for a while. So, yeah, that was a bit hairy. I kind of had this in my back of my mind going, yeah, maybe that wasn't a good idea. But we got out. I lived to tell the tale, and it's a hell of a bar story. So, it works well.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So it seems like a lot of the people that you seek out or the situations you try to put yourself into are with the players behind the scenes. You're not necessarily going to the front lines of these wars, are you? Or are you more seeking the people who are passing information and funds and things like that and kind of are working in the background?
They know far more. The guys on the front line are usually, they're 19 years old and they just needed a job and they're just holding a rifle, and they'll very much know the schedule when the artillery goes off, but they won't know much more than that. It's the logistics guys, it's the bank guys, it's the economic guys who will actually know what's going on with the war. And then the officers occasionally know some stuff, but generally it's the logistics guys who, it's very difficult to find out where a general is, but it's very easy to find out where his car's being shipped to, if you catch my drift.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Going back to now that we've satisfied my smuggling story question. So the Redline podcast, you have it available. You've been doing it for how long?
Not long. October 7 was our first episode, and we just crossed the 150,000 streams as of like 4 or 5 days ago, whatever it was.
Nice. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a long way to go, but so far it's been really great. It's been cool to get invited and speak on other shows and talk, but generally it's just chatting with some very smart people and sort of you get, a lot of the times an interview will go for 45 minutes, and then 15 minutes after the interview it's like, okay, this is all off the record. is he actually dead or is he alive? It's like, oh, yeah, he's been dead for 6 months. I just can't tell anyone. Yeah, so it's a lot of very interesting people who can give you a heads up on stuff.
Nice. And so that's just available to listen to pretty much everywhere, I assume.
Yeah, Spotify, Apple, Google, all the usual podcast places, just under the red line.
Okay. And do you have a website associated with it?
Yeah, www.theredlinepodcast.com, which sounds very original.
Okay. Also, share. Do you post to Facebook and Instagram? And if you do,
I shared it at the Redline Pod for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We really need to be doing more of that, but right now it's just so busy doing guest spots and generally just interviewing guests. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into each episode. Obviously, it's finding the right episode for guests and researching and making sure we know the stuff, getting the maps together, editing the show, making sure everything works. So yeah, there's a lot of it's why it's a fortnightly show, because there's just so much work that goes into each episode, and they're like an hour and 20 minutes long with 3 to 4 guests for each one, and they're all the biggest experts and trying to get their timing right. These guys who are working in and out the White House have like, I'm free for 40 minutes on the 12th of December at 4 a.m. your time. I'm like, okay, I'll see you at 4 a.m. my time.
Wow.
Now, how many people are you doing this with?
There's just myself, another producer. But generally it's mostly all me. The producer kind of just does a bit of the back and legal stuff. But generally most of the show I edit and write and research the show myself. It's pretty much mostly all me.
Wow. And it sounds really, really interesting. I have not had a chance to listen to it yet, but I most certainly will. Yeah,
it's a very odd podcast. But yeah, it's effectively, the whole idea is it's meant to be this sort of an hour, a block that you can go in with very little knowledge of what's going on in the situation. You can walk out with a pretty detailed geopolitical knowledge, why Russia's involved, why China's involved, what's going to happen next. You can sound very smart at a dinner party after listening to an episode about a subject.
I always enjoy that.
Have you done any on the United States?
I tend to stay away from the United States.
Smart man.
Yeah. I don't want to say. I already get enough crazy hate mail.
Right.
The States is where the majority of our listeners are. I even know that people from NORAD, because I had one of the NORAD commanders who's the United States Nuclear Missile Command, effectively, the guys who push the big red button.
They also track Santa.
Yes. one of their senior like kind of top 10 commanders sent me an email being like, well, you're pretty right on the hypersonic missile program, but here's what's actually going on. I was like, oh, okay, thanks for listening.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a really odd bunch of people who are listening to the show. I know a few senators from Australia listen. It's just this weird combination of like very boring cardigan people and important people who listen to the show. It's very odd.
I love that description.
Well, it's a really interesting topic, and I think people generally have a fascination. Like the general public has a huge fascination for understanding the intricacies of what's going on with government, especially when governments clash. And so it's a really cool topic. I mean, it's something that I'm very interested in. I know Elliot is too, and so yeah, it's really cool.
Well, that's the thing. If you can pick the moves, you can pick what's going to happen in a few months. Like, people don't think about Libya much, but whoever controls, is running the show when the Libyan civil war ends, will decide European politics for the next 6 to 8 months, because they'll control all of the migration flows. They'll control a huge part of the Mediterranean Sea and all the oil distribution through North Africa. It's these little things that no one thinks about. Like, no one thinks about Kyrgyzstan, but Kyrgyzstan is the crossroads the side of the Silk Road project, works in Central Asia, and whether Russia maintains the hold on the Caspian, all decided in this tiny little republic no one's really thought about. And that's kind of the point of the show, is these tiny little things no one thinks about is actually where the linchpins of everything we think about is.
And not only that, I think mainstream media, if they do talk about it, it's only for a small segment. And I think people are interested in subjects like this, topics like this, because, and especially in your format, because a lot of people have a slight mistrust of mainstream media, at least over the last few years. Yeah, so finding something that feels true and real is really gratifying.
Right. Well, the other thing is because it's a deep dive show, we didn't know it was going to work, but we kind of did these hour-long episodes thinking, it's going to listen an hour. And funnily enough, people kept listening. It's little things like you hear a news story like, and Russia just moved, this company has left Venezuela. It's like, that's a quick news story. You don't really think about it, but when you actually look into it, the geopolitical ramifications that are huge. But you've got to take an hour to really explain the history, how we got here, what that means and what that means coming up next. But it does take an hour with 3 of the world's best experts to explain what that actually means, because a lot of times little stories actually have huge ramifications on the world.
Have you done an episode on Russia, Syria, the Kurds, and the United States in that region, in that Turkey border region?
We are doing an episode coming up on that. It's a weirdly fluid situation over there. We did do a big piece on the PMCs, or private military companies, which that was very heavily centered in Syria. But we're doing kind of a few things around Turkey, because we're going to do a piece on Turkey when it gets a little closer to some of the elections they've got coming up. Because obviously, we'll do a piece. If we do a piece in, let's say, April, there's going to be big moves coming up in August that we know are going to be big moves coming up in August. It's going to be better to put it closer to there, so we can kind of time it when things are starting to heat up again. Because
kick it up. Yeah, really cool, man.
That is really really fascinating. So Bob and I have this new segment that we're going to try to test out on you first.
Go ahead.
So these are rapid fire questions. So we're going to ask them, we'll alternate, and you need to just say whatever comes to your mind first. We're going to try to go through them as quick as possible. And there are, I don't know if I said this, there are 20.
Shoot.
All right. Bob, you want to start?
Sure. What is the first word that comes to your mind when you hear the word travel?
Airports.
All right. What home comfort do you miss the most while traveling?
My own toilet. It's just nice having your own toilet when you come back. And my own shower. That's the other one. I'm sick of terrible, terrible showers in these godforsaken places.
Agreed. Do you prefer to travel solo or with a partner?
With a partner. Someone has to listen to me ramble, and it's much easier to get through if you have one other person with you.
If you could swim in any liquid, what would it be?
Ooh, I'm gonna say nacho cheese. Just because I think that would be
Is that a liquid? It's a liquid.
Call it we'll let it pass.
It's an amorphous solid.
Otherwise, Cuba Libres. I'll go with that.
Oh, nice. All right.
Pick any 2 animals that you want to see fight.
Ooh, 2 animals I want to see fight. I think a giraffe and I'm gonna say a giraffe and an emu. A giraffe and an emu. I think 2 long necks doing this would be just hilarious to watch for some reason.
All right. Would you rather drink wine or coffee for the rest of your life?
Wine. Coffee doesn't take away the sadness much.
Okay.
Say hello in your favorite language.
Привет.
Is that Transnistrian?
That's Russian. It's such a direct language. It doesn't have this weird nonsense English has with all its syntaxes and whatnot.
Would you rather be stuck on a cruise ship or stuck in the Amazon jungle?
Amazon. A cruise ship seemed absolutely terrifying to me.
Agreed.
Yeah.
If you could travel with anyone in the world, living or dead, who would it be?
Ooh. I'm living or dead. Theodore Roosevelt. I think it'd be really interesting.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Teddy Roosevelt. That guy seems like a party animal wherever he goes, and he seems to get himself in a lot of trouble.
And you'd be stuck in the Amazon with him.
Right.
Which do you prefer, the beach or the mountains?
Mountains. If you can't tell my pasty white complexion, I only go vanilla and strawberry with my tan. I do not tan well.
There's no chocolate. There's no Neapolitan.
No, my parents are Canadians, so I'm white or very, very burnt.
Who would win in a fight, a wombat or a sloth?
Ooh, I know this. Wombats actually kill people quite often.
Okay.
Really. What they do is they're like running in little burrows, and as you stick your head in, and tourists do all the time, they stick their head in, and the wombat
Good to know.
claws your face off. Yeah, plus they kill heaps of people in traffic accidents. If you hit a wombat with your car, you actually bend the car around the wombat. They're just bricks.
Wow.
They're just bricks with eyes, effectively.
Some wombat knowledge right now.
Yeah.
This is that's what the podcast is. We just talk about wombats for 2 hours.
Spaghetti and meatballs or pad thai?
I'm going to say pad thai, but there's nothing better than like that 3 a.m. spaghetti and meatballs.
Mm-hmm.
What is one item remaining on your bucket list?
Ooh, I haven't fired a rocket launcher yet, and I've always wanted to do that.
I could see you doing that.
Javelin or RPG?
I got right. RPG. They're much more fun. I got real close. I found a guy who could get me one, but I had to leave the country the day he was going to come in. But yeah, I got real close to doing it in Ukraine. But yeah, that's been on my bucket list for a while.
It sounds like it might happen though.
Yeah, I think
I
so.
definitely will. I'll make
it.
Who is your biggest celebrity crush?
Celebrity crush. Theodore Roosevelt.
That's we'll allow it.
Emma Stone's are always pretty cute. I'll give Emma Stone.
All right.
I'm on board with that as well. A window or aisle seat?
Aisle. I can get up. I have more arm room. I can work on my laptop. And I've had far too many people fall asleep on me. But now I've given up. I sit on the aisle now.
What is your favorite travel item?
Passport's a big one. Otherwise, packs of Australian cigarettes. I'm not a big smoker myself, but because particularly in the old Soviet countries, cigarettes are terrible. They're like burnt lawn trimmings. You can trade two decent Australian cigarettes for free drinks for the entire night. So when I leave Australia, I buy 5 or 6 packs of cigarettes, always have something in my coat.
Wow.
But yeah, it gets you out of trouble, makes good friends.
Genius.
And you can trade them for just about anything.
That is genius.
You can trade it for. I traded a couple of cigarettes to do a practice run with the Latvian bobsledding team in Latvia. Like you can trade cigarettes for anything.
Wow. So you're definitely going to be trading cigarettes to fire that RPG.
It's going to cost you a lot of cigarettes. But
yeah. If you were stuck in one city for the rest of your life, which city would you choose?
Tbilisi, or it would either be Moscow because there's just so much to do, or Tbilisi, Georgia is really, really beautiful and the food's amazing. Although I would weigh 100 kilos extra by the end of the week. It's just really fattening food.
If you owned a yacht, what would you name it?
Terrible financial decisions.
All right.
Yacht a problem.
I like the first one.
Yeah.
Last question. Who is your favorite Traveler's Blueprint podcast host?
Ooh.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
You're breaking up. I can't hear you.
All right. We'll leave it off on there.
No, thanks so much for having me. It's been absolutely great hanging with you guys, and love to hear some of your travel stories as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll reconnect, I'm sure, and stay in touch. Let us know when you want to come back on, and thanks, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Anytime. Always happy to have a chat.
So, like I mentioned in the intro, this was one of the most unique travel stories we've had to date.
Series of travel stories.
Correct.
Like they just never ended.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Personally, I don't know if I could ever get comfortable drinking with the Taliban. I'm pretty sure I would feel uneasy sitting next to someone involved in that group, especially as an American. I don't know. Yeah. But as an Australian, they're not. They were right by our side through most of the conflict. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I don't know how I would handle a situation if I got invited to a club in China and then had a gun pointed at me by the Russian mafia. I know now that I shouldn't flinch at all, but I can't tell you what my bowels would do.
Right. Well, that's always one of those things that they say, you don't know until you're in that situation. You can't even say how you'd react. No. You can try to think how you'd react. You can be hopeful, but until you're in that situation.
Yeah. Well, I think Michael's been pretty well ironed for a situation like that.
Yeah, I agree. But what an incredible conversation. His podcast, the Redline podcast, I saw just hit 500,000 downloads.
Yeah.
So he really, and it wasn't just on our podcast, he has an incredibly unique niche, and it's a good podcast. I highly recommend checking it out.
If you're looking for a deep dive at this time and you want to learn more about geopolitical things going on, like really, really in-depth stuff and behind the scenes with people that were or are involved.
Right.
So don't forget to give us a rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Follow us on social media. Reach out to us via email or Instagram or Facebook, and tune in next week.